On stage, I fight, but on the tatami, I dance.
Which came first, the poem or the painting?
I was really surprised that I could write a poem. That's when the refining began, the refining of creativity.
Actually, I believe that this knowledge is not human.
The creation of the world garden of poetry.
There are even people who are older than me, but they listen, they ask questions.
This flow always demands music.
I feel an incredible bliss, yes, a kind that I haven't experienced from sex or delicious food or alcohol or anything else.
The world needs branches.
I started writing my book, which is called Being Happy, The Secret at the Tip of Your Nose.
But the finale was also a conversation with the cosmonaut. It lasted about 12 minutes. Didn't Elon Musk stop you? I'm asking directly, if fate brings a collaboration with SpaceX, that would be awesome too.
I welcome you to this incredibly interesting podcast. Today we are joined by Vasily Popov. I'm not afraid to say Ives a well-known person. He is a writer, an artist, and a poet. Vasily has met with Elon Musk, Igor Rybakov, and Oskar Hartmann, and it's very interesting to get to know such a character. For me personally, it's a great honor to have Vasily on my podcast. We met at the Crypto South conference. I looked at his paintings. I'm a creative person myself, and all of this really resonates with me. And moreover, I like that Vasily was able to achieve such large-scale success through creativity and, as I understand it, financially as well, because his paintings are being sold. He'll tell us himself for how much in a moment. So, Vasily, welcome.
Thank you.
Let's start right from the beginning. I'm a number 3, just like you. We were both born on the 3rd. By the way, we were just talking about that before the podcast. So, and I like a certain structure. I'd like to, for you to walk us through your life's journey, not necessarily in detail, but just to give us an overview, up to the present. What you've been doing, how you grew up, what kind of family you were born into, where you were born, how you developed as a person. So I'd really like to explore that aspect.
It's interesting to really dive into history and into my own story. Well, I should start by saying that my parents are villagers. They were born in villages. This is in the Irkutsk region, and well, you could say these are pretty remote villages. Yeah, and I spent my entire childhood in those villages. Yeah, and you could say I absorbed the whole cycle of village life with my mother's milk. That is all 4 seasons: spring, summer, winter, and autumn. And in each of these periods, there is specific work to be done. There are particular tasks: haymaking, gathering firewood, picking berries and mushrooms. There were an incredible number of animals: horses, cows, sheep, dogs. Not to mention the cats who were always around, as friends and companions. So, as a village boy, I grew up interacting with nature and animals. This, let's say, is the first milestone that should be mentioned, and where the roots of my, for example, poetic creativity come from. The second thing is that, well, we were, of course, born in the city. It's a small town, well, compared to big cities. It's not large, called Angarsk near Irkutsk in the Irkutsk region. And the second milestone, apart from school, is that I practice Russian folk dancing. I did that for 15 years before I moved to Moscow. Yes, and that's the second stage that definitely influenced me. When you start doing this from a young age, and by the time you're 20, you already performing on stage and dancing 10 different dances from various cultures around the world, that also shapes your personality, your destiny, and your understanding, especially when you go on tour to different cities across our vast country, and not just our country, but abroad as well. There, you really feel the history of dance through other culture. It's just incredibly vivid, and with the music, it completely permeates you. The third stage. Of course, I should mention both school and my first university were all in the Irkutsk region. And to sum up, I have 2 periods in my life. The first period is the Siberian one. That's where I was shaped up until the age of 22, where I danced and kept dancing, and well, went to school and finished my first university. But I should also add that it's where my character was formed. When I was dancing, I started having problems at school, like any other guy trying to stand up for myself, or well, that sort of guy's dignity. So I also started doing judo. Yeah, I was doing both dancing and judo at the same time. Up until 11th grade, no one knew I was performing on stage. That's another amazing story. But everyone knew I did judo, and judo was also really interesting to practice. I think I lost my first 6 or 7 competitions in the very first match. Yeah, in the very first match, and I just couldn't do anything about it. I had like, well, this crazy energy. I couldn't handle either the nerves or the state you get into when you step onto the tatami, you start fighting and just freeze up. And at the 7th or 8th competition, I went out and won for the first time well in the match. And not only did I win, I beat the next opponent and the next, and ended up taking first place. So basically, I kept losing all the time. And then suddenly I win the competition in my category. It was something incredible. Of course, even my father didn't believe it, since I always came back. He said, "Come on, how did you win?" And I told him, "That's how I won, had 5 matches. I won them all and took first place." And that was also a turning point when I started to believe in myself. After that, I started winning second and third places and first places too, and eventually reached the level of candidate for Master of Sports in Judo. I came up with a rule for myself, and with this rule, we'll wrap up the Siberian period of my development. The rule is on stage, I fight, but on the tatami, I dance. And that's why it gave me the ability, so to speak, to dance and win in the ring. And on stage, to fight and bring out beauty through dance. That was the first major Siberian period when I was developing specifically in the Irkutsk region. I'm talking for a long time, aren't I? But that's just how life goes. But it's interesting, and that's where I naturally started writing poetry. I began writing poetry, had my first attempts where initial discussions took place, debates occurred, and I joined the writers' organization. It was there that I was advised to go to Moscow and apply to University Gorky Literary Institute in Moscow. That's the name of the university. And it's a unique university as well. Naturally, I hadn't heard anything about it. This university is so small that there are only 100 students from all over the country. The competition is fierce than applicants for each spot. It was established during the Soviet era to educate writers. So, specifically, writers, poets, playwrights, and prose writers studied there, and it has survived. It still exists today and continues to train writers, so to speak, helping them hone their literary skills. That's it. So I submit my application. Well, actually, what kind of documents are there? You have to send in your own works. So I send my poems there. It's like an arts university, like when people apply to Gnesin Academy or to become an actor or a director. We have a university in our country where you can apply to become a writer. It's an amazing story. Few people know about it, but it does exist. I wouldn't have known either if I hadn't started interacting more closely with writers in the Irkutsk region. I feel like if I keep going, I'll tell everything and the podcast will be over, basically. You've already spent an hour and a half just talking about your journey. Yeah. So I'll give a brief summary now. The second period is my Moscow period. Oh, but how I ended up in Moscow is also quite a story. Since I graduated from the Literary Institute in Moscow, well, I mean, I attended the Literary Institute full time. I actually applied to the Literary Institute for the correspondence program, the part-time department, and they sent me a reply. I remember that envelope. My hands were literally shaking. An envelope from the Literary Institute, and I opened it thinking, well, it could go either way. Either you invited, or unfortunately, your works didn't pass the selection. I open it, take out the letter, and read, "You are invited to Moscow to take the entrance exam." I was like, wow. I mean, such happiness, such joy. So the first stage of the competition, my poems passed the selection, and then you have to take exams like Russian literature, a creative exam, and basically a bunch of exams you have to pass to get in. That's it. So I got ready and went. And when I applied, I passed the exams. I passed the creative exam. And the most surprisingly interesting thing is I wasn't planning to stay in Moscow. I mean, the correspondence program assumes you just study there for 1 month, then leave and work at home. I had even already gotten a job back home. I got a job, was already working, and took time off from work for a month to take the exams. You spend a month there taking the exams, and the rector invites meet. That time the rector was Sergei Nikolaevich for a personal conversation. He invites me. I come in, and he says, "You know what, Vasily, we want to offer you a loan out of this whole group, the chance to stay in Moscow, and we'll give you a spot so you can study in the full-time program." He says, "This is the first time in 10 years of our practice, but you have to study in Moscow, stay here." I say, I mean, well, like I say, I don't know. He says, "Well, go think about it." So I say, "But how am I even supposed to tell my parents?" He says, "Go call them." So I called and said, "They're offering me something here." And I remember my mom got confused and said, "Vasha, it's up to you. You decide." I mean, in my family, there were no writers, no artists, nothing like that. And especially me, what was I even doing going off to study literature? So in the end, I said, "All right, I'll stay. I accept." And that's how I stayed. In Moscow, they gave me a dorm room. I said, "Yes, there's still this question, where are we going to find you a place in the dorm?" That's it, everything's full. But they gave me a dorm room. The rector went to the Ministry of Education and said that they were taking on one more student, and managed to get me a spot above the quota. And the quota had already been exceeded long ago, but they enrolled me in this course as someone who received an additional, basically, position, vacation, more extra spot. That's how I stayed in Moscow and began my studies, started my journey, if you can call it that, as a professional poet. Of course, there's really no such thing as a professional poet. Poet is simply a poet, but perhaps can hone their craft more finely, and that's exactly what the Literary Institute provided, a school of literary mastery. There, everything is just compressed. On your own, it might have taken you, well, 15 years, but at the Literary Institute, in that community, you sort of get steeped in it, and all of that is delivered to you in concentrated form over 5 years. That's it. And I was always drawing, and that's how I developed in culture, in literature. And in 2021, when the NFT boom happened, I realized that all my little sketches, the ones I used to doodle in the margins, could actually find their place in this new technology. And moreover, could be sold very quickly and find a collector. And it worked for me. And that's all. I started trying myself in this industry. It complements and, in a way, is the flip side of my poetic work. It's also great to explore your own soul, your personality, and to look at the other side of the moon, so to speak. That's it in short. That's it in short.
We will talk more about NFTs in a moment. I know that you're the first person in the world to send your NFT artwork into space
Yes,
to the ISS, right? By the way, what year was that?
in 22
In 22.
or in 23.
We'll talk about that in a moment. For now, I want to ask some clarifying questions. From your story, I understood and came to the conclusion, that when a person follows their own path, it's as if fate itself helps them. Like in your case, the rector or whoever it was went and got you a spot, made arrangements for you, right? So you were just following your own path. I also have similar examples in my own life. I won't talk about them right now. I just drew a parallel and realized how great it is when you find yourself in your own path like that. But I wanted to ask which came first, the poem or the painting you created. The poem? How did it happen actually? Just remember the moment when you wrote your first poem. What was that like? Where does that come from?
I remember it absolutely clearly because I didn't start writing in my very early childhood. I remember there were some attempts, to write and express my thoughts, but I was so busy at 13 or 14. I was into dancing and judo that I really didn't have any time even to write. But I consciously remember that a girl in 11th grade asked me, she said, write something for me as a keepsake at the end of my notebook. I started writing and poems just started pouring out of me. And I wasn't even planning to, I just wanted to write something, and then poems started flowing, and I was like, bam, bam. And suddenly I came up with a poem, basically. And I was surprised at myself. Wow, I didn't know you could do that, that I could actually write poetry. So I'm amazed. And I give her the poem, and she was like, oh, thank you, and all that. And basically, I really got a kick out of it. I was really surprised that I could write a poem. Then I remember coming home and thinking, let me try again. So I sat down. I remember thinking, what should I write? What do I even write? Looking out, I saw a poplar tree and wrote about it. And it turns into a poem. I realized that I can write poetry basically. And that's it. Then I went on. I remember I filled up a whole notebook with poems. And then I had this feeling that I needed to talk to someone about it, to find someone else who writes. After that, I started getting more into literature, started looking at poetry. So basically, I started with books, and that's when I started getting into books more consciously. And of course, the first poet who really impressed me was Sergei Alexandrovich Yesenin, one of my favorite poets, who is so clear. And for me, he's the gateway to Russian literature. He's a gateway for everyone because, well, if you want to start exploring Russian literature, or even if you just want to read, start with Sergei Alexandrovich. He will guide you through all the beauty of the Russian language. I found people, the training began, and everyone said everything you wrote is basically crap. They don't mince words there either, and they started pointing things out. I began to see what the real mistakes were, what those weren't. The polishing began, the refining of creativity. This is also an important aspect, comparing your own works to the great classics. No more, no less. Why did we switch to literature? We were supposed to be talking about space, weren't we?
I just asked when you first wrote a poem, when you first wrote one down, and where does that come from? You mentioned an interesting moment that the poems just started flowing. I have my own story too, which I wanted to share with you and get your feedback on. I'm not a poet at all, I've never written poetry. That's it. But around 2007, I started to actively immerse myself in spirituality and esotericism, practicing, meditating, got involved in a tradition, in a teaching with an enlightened master, received all sorts of initiations, basic practices, and for several years I was really deeply into it.
And in what?
The Laya Yoga tradition, well, it's basically a form of yoga, but
India?
well, yes, it's more Hinduism. But again, Hinduism is just what people can understand. That's it. Actually, I believe that this knowledge isn't human, and humanity just makes use of it. That's it. So, what's the point? In 2017, I started writing my book called Being Happy: The Secret at the Tip of Your Nose. This book is essentially a compilation of the knowledge I've gained over my life, right? And most of it is knowledge that I got from my guru, from his books, right? I simply adapted it into clear, simple language without Sanskrit terms. Or if I did use Sanskrit, I explained it right away, That's it. And I also added some of my own experiences that I went through myself and structured it all. So it's a small book that you can read in one evening, right? But it serves as an answer to the question, where do I start? I mean, I was constantly talking with friends about spiritual topics, And there are even people who are older than me, but they listen, ask questions. And the most common question is, if someone wants to get into spirituality, they ask, where do I start? And I always had to put together some kind of compilation, give them some lectures, right? But now my book is the answer because it contains this basic understanding of where to begin. And basically, while I was writing this book, I hit a kind of writer's block, you could say. That is, at some point I couldn't continue it. I just couldn't finish writing it. Either my inspiration left me or, well, it just stopped flowing, you know. So I went on a retreat. I went to a Vasham in Altai for a 2-week retreat. That is complete silence. They bring you food twice a day. You can go for a walk in the mountains a few times, and that's about it. From 6 in the morning until 11 at night, you have a scheduled routine of practices, meditation, asanas, breathing exercises. And so basically you get caught up in this kind of experience, right? And at first, when I started the retreat, of course, my mind was still very active out of habit. You start chewing over, mulling over all sorts of ideas, all kinds of problematic things, right? But around the 4th or 5th day, your mind calms down and you just start to experience what in yoga is called shanti, right? That is, it's a kind of peace, tranquility. Yeah. And on the 10th day, I was sitting doing my practice, listening to a mantra dedicated to Shiva. Well, it's not even really a mantra, it's a bhajan. So it's more like a hymn, a chant dedicated to the deity Shiva, right? And at that moment, I just, well, I've never really shared this experience publicly before. I consider this, like right now, I'm really pulling out from within myself, something that,
That's wonderful.
yeah, but right now I really feel ready to share it with you specifically and get your feedback. I'm experiencing quite a powerful mystical, or you could say spiritual experience. Basically, a stream of light literally enters me, and I just dissolve into this light. I feel an incredible bliss, a kind I've never experienced from anything else in life, not from sex, not from delicious food, not from alcohol, not from anything else. Yeah, and before I used to have these how should I put it?
Epiphanies.
Yeah, these little moments of bliss, micro experiences, epiphanies, let's call them that, yeah. But this time it hit me and lasted for about 20 minutes. I mean, I was just sitting there completely immersed in it. I came out of that state actually. I pulled myself out of it. I could have stayed there even longer, but it felt like that's enough. It just came to me intuitively. I thought to myself, I need to capture this somehow so I don't lose or forget this state. And as soon as I thought about that, a poem started pouring out of me. I mean, I've never written poetry before, but just like that, top in literally 10 minutes, I typed out a poem. That's it. And then I tweaked it a little, smoothed out some rough edges here and there so it would read really well. I want to read it to you now so you can give me some feedback.
Please go right ahead.
So I titled the poem, Dissolve Me in Yourself. I dwell in divine bliss. To you, Lord, I call with all my heart. I open myself to your love and abide in clear light. From the awareness of you, my whole body is covered in goosebumps. Thank you for blessing me with your silent presence. Though you have never left me, you have always been near and have blessed me. But I was blind and immersed in my desires, blinded by pride. I dwelled in illusions. My mind was asleep. But with your love, you melted my mind and awakened me from a bad dream through pain. Thank you, Lord, for everything. Now I see that there is no me, there is only you, always and in everything. And you were never born by anyone, ever. You are eternally aware of yourself. And I am just like your radiant, manifested from the void. I am a part of you, but all these words of mine cannot express the fullness. I am ready to give everything to you so that you may take me to yourself and dissolve me in you. Of course, this is probably just a part of the experience I went through and was able to express in words. Because the experience itself was even more vivid.
Yes, I understand you very well, and I'll start, my feedback with the very first phrase you just said, that knowledge is not human. All knowledge is absolutely not human, in fact. We only gradually discover it, right? After all, they exist and existed even before you, for example, found and discovered that knowledge. So it was already there. It existed before, we just hadn't discovered it yet. So all all knowledge is truly not human, and we simply uncover it gradually. That's the first point, right? So, the second thing I want to say about our current conversation is that there are, well, apparently three branches for acquiring knowledge. One is through human experience, which we simply record. Another is through the flow that can pass through us. And the third is just through mental activity. So it can be from person to person, just through your own head and through the flow. It's just divine when something is simply revealed to you and you pour it out. And this experience that happens to you is definitely, well, an experience of light and flow. And what's most interesting, notice this flow always demands music. I mean, why is it that when it happens, it wants to shape our language into a built-in structure, into poetry, into music? That's music. I mean, when you speak in verse, it's a special form of language. A special form of language, and not everyone is capable of it, right? There really aren't that many poets in life. They're rare people, essentially. And if you have the ability to turn speech into music, into poetry, of course, that's not my own achievement. It's a talent that's been given to you to serve, and you have to make use of it. And then you get it, right? It's clear that this isn't my own achievement. Anyone who starts boasting about being an amazing poet or an incredible artist doesn't understand one thing, that it's also a heavy burden, a cross to bear, so that you can fulfill something in life. You need to find that purpose and fulfill it. That's the next aspect, so to speak, of a divine perception. And the final thing I want to say is that when you catch this moment, you definitely need to write it down and then look back at what came to you, what arrived. I'm sure that when you started writing, well, now it's clear that it's gratitude, it's free verse, it's not quite a musical poem yet, but it's free verse, and that's still poetry. Free verse, which essentially it's gratitude, and gratitude, is the highest thing a person can experience, because many people can't reach gratitude with their feelings and consciousness. To be grateful to the world, to be grateful for life, to be grateful to God, to be grateful for what is happening to you. Usually it's all just grumbling, constant complaining. Why isn't it like that? Why isn't it like that? If you just slightly shift your perspective on the world towards gratitude, both people and events will start aligning in a different direction, precisely in the way that matches your vision, the path you're taking. And a person will act even sometimes without understanding why they're helping this particular person. So it's really a kind of synergy, a true synergy, like how words come together in a poetic verse. In the same way, if a person follows their own path, people gather around them like words, building that path, because the world needs these branches of creative, constructive attitudes in society to support it rather than to destroy it.
Thank you.
That's the story. So we can talk about this, we can discuss it, and you see, our conversation is building up to this because we're on the same wavelength of understanding, awareness, and where a person is actually heading, well, through different tools.
Tell me, is there spirituality in your life? Specifically, of course, you have it. It's kind of built in. Everyone has it, right? Especially you as a poet and a creative person. I mean, in the form of any specific practical tools, effective practices, or innovative methods that you personally use to become more creative, more resourceful, more enlightened, and indeed more aware in your daily life and endeavors.
Well, for me, of course, the highest thing is poetry, poetic creativity. That's the highest form of expression in culture, in my opinion. And I actually came to the realization and even found confirmation of why that is. And I'll tell you now. There are three main branches: painting, music, and poetry. So why is poetry considered the highest form of creativity? Well, that doesn't mean that all of them aren't necessary, but poetry is kind of at the top of the pyramid, if you look at it that way. Why? Because painting is in third place, since you can only see it, but you can't hear it. That is, with painting, you don't hear it, you only see it. With music, you hear it, but you don't see it. Well, to sort of But you can imagine it, right? With music, but in poetry, there's both music and you imagine and you see and you also read. That is, in music, there are no words, there's no meaning, no semantic content, right? Paintings have meaning, but there's no music in them. So in poetry, all of these are intertwined, as if in three forms. Because in poetry, you see, you hear, you imagine, and the music of the words is also present. And that's why it's, well, the quintessence of all creative things is buried precisely in poetry, sort of. But what's the thing? What's the catch? But a painting is the easiest to perceive. That is, you look at it and immediately understand everything, kind of. Music, it adds feeling, emotion. But poetry is actually the hardest to perceive. You can like read it, but not really get it. So you really need to go through painting and music first, and only then move on to poetry. That's why they say that poetry is sort of, because in order to truly feel a poem the way you feel a painting or music, you need to go through the experience of painting and music first to really sense it. Although you can touch upon it and so on, it's actually very easy to achieve. Just spend a year reading one poem a day. It only takes 1 or 2 minutes. Your brain simply is a life hack for how to restructure your brain. And this is my personal mantra. For example, if you read one poem a day, it will structure your brain not only at the level of neural networks, but even at the level of the crystal lattice. I'm telling you this with absolute certainty because language is a code. And well, all words are their codes. And when those words are recorded by poets, I mean, read the classics like Pushkin, Yesenin, Nekrasov, whether it's Russian poetry or translated works. I don't know. These are ultra codes that just permeate you literally with light, nothing more, nothing less.
Let's come down to Earth a little so we can then take off into space.
Yes, 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 yes.
So, because, well, we've already mentioned that you're the first person in the world to launch an NFT artwork into space, right? How did you come to this idea and how much did it cost you? I'm curious.
I came to this through an idea that also came up in the NFT community back in 2021, like who's going to launch an artwork into space? Something like that just flew by. And naturally, that thought struck me, oh, that's something interesting, Interesting. And since I've always loved space, in fact, when I was a boy in the village, I used to love lying on the roof and staring at the sky for hours. Especially in the evenings when the stars would come out, I would just lose myself in that sky. And during the day, I'd lie there watching the clouds. It was like a movie playing for me. So for me, all the clouds basically were horses or some kind of monsters. They would merge together and some kind of battle would begin. Basically, I would make up fairy tales for myself just by looking at the sky. That's it. And naturally, I fell in love with space and scientific literature, and I always wondered, what is all this around us, really? And to touch it, naturally, I immediately had the idea to reach out to space through creativity, to touch it, to go out into the cosmos, and that was it. I started doing everything I could to make that happen. And as we've already established, when there is a creative story, people, events, and even money start to align themselves with that story. And you gather all of this sort of into your own spaceship that's flying. And so I started knocking on different doors, including Roscosmos, and I kept going. And here, someone gives you a hint. He doesn't influence things directly, but he suggests some story, a direction I turn towards. Then I listen to another person and he says something else. And I have an acquaintance like that. And so through a few handshakes where you need some resources, some money, you pull those into, because where payment is needed, you can't avoid it. Payment, you pay for this step because it requires it. And most likely, payment always saves time. If you understand this and know what you're doing, then you pay for this step and you save time there. But still, this whole process took about a year, although a year is neither a lot nor a little, really. So after a year, I meet the cosmonaut. Uh, we also sat down and talked. So this is already the final point. There was also the matter of getting permission from Roscosmos. That was a whole paperwork ordeal and a financial one too. But the real finale was another conversation with the cosmonaut when we sat down and talked and sincerely understood the purpose of it all. Because one of the ideas, besides turning this into a world poetry garden, is that there's also a global story behind this painting. I also suggested that while it's in space, we should put together a book about space. That is, we'll invite Russian writers to reflect on space. There hasn't been a book like this in a long time to write stories, poems about space, and some will share their memories related to the theme of space. There was even a woman there, Marina Valerievna Ganicheva, a woman writer, who once sat on Gagarin's lap. And she included those memories in the book as well. So that's how this book came together. And we published it. It's in this huge format. I called it Time for Space. And it was released in a very limited edition and distributed to libraries across the country as a kind of contribution as well. While the painting was in orbit, this book about space was created. So she said, "Oh, what a great idea. I also took your painting and we did it, filmed it there. And now this painting is on its way to a world auction, the proceeds from which will be invested in creating the World Garden of Poetry."
Cool. And when will this world auction take place?
In fact, it has already started in 2025. There is a website where this painting is presented along with the starting price. The person who places the first bid starts the auction. That's all there is to it.
No one has placed a bid, right?
The starting bid 5 Ether.
The first one?
Yes.
How much is that in dollars right now?
At the moment, 5,000 times 2,500. How much would that be? About $10 million, something like that. $12 million.
I just heard in your interview with someone that you said you want to break the Guinness record. That's $68 million, I think. That was the record for which a painting was sold. And you want to, well, make it 100 roughly and break that record, right?
Yes.
But if someone offers 5,000 ETH and no one outbids them, then basically you'd be fine with 5,000 ETH as well.
Well, that's how fate would have it, really. But I have a feeling that this auction will happen and it will reach exactly the number I have in mind, the one I'm projecting and working towards. That's it. That's the kind of maximalism I have, but it's also the next challenge to create the World Garden of Poetry and the next stage, which needs to be assembled, let's call it this spaceship that needs to take off. Why am I saying this? Why am I even bringing this up? Because my fate shows me that this is possible. Go and gather it, because people told me I've seen it. Dozens of times people have spun a finger at their temple and said, what literary institute, what Moscow, at that level, right? There are like 10 people competing for each spot, back and forth. I arrive and they invite me to the in-person round. Then what Elon Musk, what other meeting? I meet with Elon Musk. Like there are just so many moments like this when people keep telling me basically that it's impossible.
By the way, let's talk about Elon Musk. Why did you meet with him and what did you talk about?
Well, in the cryptosphere, Elon Musk plays not just in the cryptosphere, but in the world in general, let's say, an interesting role. You could call him a cosmic influencer, and his ideas deserve special attention. Even the fact that he's planning to go to Mars, that's also, an unusual story, right? And to come into contact, I actually believe, by the way, that information is transmitted not only, through books, but also absolutely through a handshake. A person's informational field also transmits, well, its own understanding of the world. So even on a micro level, when people communicate, they also share information about themselves, transmitting it, through their field. That's right. And that's why when it comes to meeting remarkable people, I also look forward to it, crave it, observe, and never miss an opportunity to take advantage of what fate offers. And last year in Indonesia, fate happened to offer just such an opportunity. We sat quietly, and on top of the mountain looked at the ocean and how they were surfing there. Uh, and the information flew. Elon Musk is flying to the island. What? Right now? He says, yes, well, in short, there is a water forum, the World Water Forum. They will discuss water problems in the world. And so he flies in for a visit. And then basically it was like a quantum bomb exploded in my heart. I have to do everything I can to meet him, you know. How do I do it? Where do I go? No background, no like instructions on what to do. You have to figure them out yourself. So what? You sit down and start like putting things together. You start by gathering information. When is he arriving? What is he coming for? Basically, the information is that he's already arrived. I think, where did he arrive? Probably at the most expensive hotel, you know. And there are the top hotels there, like the Kempinski. And what other hotels were there? So I went to those hotels basically, and I grabbed this bike. And the funniest thing is, he arrives at the part of the island where we were staying, you know, where the forum was. I found out that the forum the forum is actually just 1 kilometer from the hotel where I was staying. This is the forum. It's basically at the next hotel, somewhere over there. That's where the forum is happening. So I thought, this is really a sign, like a moment that clearly says you have to act.
Fate's gift.
Yeah, to act. I go around the hotels asking at the reception, is Elon Musk staying here by any chance? I ask. Well, if it's a guest like that, they check. They check. No, Elon isn't here. I think, well, okay, this option didn't work out, let's say. Although, you know, that option could have actually worked out. What if he really did stay there, right? Yeah. So basically, I drove around to these hotels like that, and at the same time, I was gathering information and realized that actually he hadn't arrived yet. That is, he's arriving for the dinner, for the official opening of this forum. It's already late at night, so I go to bed, and in the morning, I get up and head to this forum and buy a ticket. I buy a ticket to the forum. You could just buy a ticket there. Yeah, but the ticket is just for a regular attendee. There were about 40 participating countries, and these were VIPs, ministers overall. It was a really high-profile forum, the World Water Forum, where practically heads of state gathered, right? So ministers and ministries. There was this group, probably about 300 people who were part of this VIP pool who traveled around and so on. And there were, well, probably about 20,000 guests who could attend and so on and so forth. Naturally, it was impossible to get into any VIP meetings, let alone the opening, with a regular ticket. You had to look for a way in, and that opportunity, like a door, like a space, opened up for me as well. So I came, it was already the third day. On the second day, I wanted to get into the dinner where they were meeting with the president. I didn't get in there. Well, it's a long story. I have a Telegram channel where I tell this story in more detail, almost like a movie. You can read it there. People tell me, keep going, you write so interestingly, as if they're watching a whole movie. Yeah. And there I described it in more detail. So on the third day, there's that number 3 again. On the third day, I finally got the chance to attend the opening of this forum, where he was speaking, where I listened to him, where I observed his behavior, how he acts in real life on stage, how he talks, his tone of voice. You know, I mean, it's one thing to see and hear him on a screen, but it's completely different when you can listen to him right here in person. And I managed, as they say, to come up to him for a minute, shake his hand, and say, "Hello, Elon, I love space." He said, "You have a cool t-shirt." That was when I was taking a photo. And then he kind of gestured towards his assistant. Yeah. And then I'm describing this to it, took the whole day, basically. Then I found the assistant in another building, but only after 4 hours. Also in a rather surprising way. Well, they had arrived by jet, and there I told her and showed her a video from space. She congratulated me and said, "Oh, that's cool. We exchanged contacts, and she said, send me that video from space, I'll show it to Elon. I sent her that video. So the next step is that I want to go to a SpaceX launch and see how they launch a rocket. Which state do they launch from? It doesn't matter which state they launch from. Basically, they launch like Elon Musk does, and if fate brings a collaboration with SpaceX, that would be awesome too.
By collaboration, do you mean you want to send another NFT?
Well, I could send poetry this time, maybe a poem. You can really come up with anything. But in any case, the fact that it will be a creative act aimed at creating the World Poetry Garden is absolutely certain.
Tell me about these attributes that you decided to put on the table before recording, that is the cap in your book.
Yes.
With poems?
Yes. Well, first of all, of course, it's a book, it's a poem, it's poetry. Every creative person should always have, so to speak, a physical home or a kind of milestone as something they must create as they live their life. And for example, a book is also such a milestone. When you've written poems over a certain period, you collect them and then you can, so to speak, release them into the world. So basically, for a poet, a book is that very milestone, a kind of marker, and it's actually what allows you to move forward. Well, and the cap is already a modern story. It's been 4 years now that I've been creating digital artworks. And for example, I get to do collaborations with merch, to create t-shirts and hoodies with my works, which is also great. And so this is yet another stage that is unfolding right now at this very moment. And ultimately, I think they will come together and form a kind of global digital garden of poetry and also a physical one where you'll be able to discover masterpieces of world poetry from all over the globe in one place, both in digital form and in a physical space you can actually visit. In general, the World Poetry Garden is several hundred trees, with each tree bearing the name of a great poet from each country. Every country has its own Pushkin, right? There is a sun, the sun of poetry. And why is it called worldwide? Because it will bring together all the great poets from every country where you can get acquainted with their works. And this kind of space really amazed me in Krasnodar. I just couldn't pass up the chance to visit Galitsky Park, and I was absolutely blown away. I thought, yes, this is what a garden should be. Well, just imagine in this garden creating a similar space, kind of worldwide garden of poetry where you walk up. Have you seen it? All those trees, that beauty, and you approach each tree. And for example, it's the tree of Alexander Pushkin or Nguyen Du from Vietnam, a great poet. And as you stroll, you can also listen to poetry. Or, for example, what I'm envisioning there is, say, a route dedicated to the theme of space. And as you walk along it, there are poems from all over the world, right? So from everywhere you have roots about space or about nature, about love. So that's the idea, to create such a worldwide garden of poetry. Well, naturally, this also includes educational projects for future generations, for children, a poetry theater, and so on and so forth.
I'm interested in the location. Where would this be if it's a worldwide garden? Where?
Well, the location currently being considered is, of course, Moscow or the Moscow region. But there's also another aspect being considered. Whoever buys this NFT, yes, the person who buys it, they could be from any country. And it's possible that part of the garden could actually be started in the country where the buyer is from. It could be China, it could be the United Arab Emirates, it could even be India, right? In other words, a person just needs to see this story and understand its creative purpose. And when they see this story, well, money doesn't really matter here, right? What matters is the purpose, the reason, and for how long this is being created. This is a legacy for all of humanity, and it needs to be created. And well, this project needs to be introduced to the powers that be, let's say the financial ones. And they just need to transform them into this garden of poetry, which will inspire future generations as well.
If you have 5,000 ethers, you're ready to place a bid. We'll leave a link to the website where you can do this under this video.
Yes.
If this idea resonates with you,
We will create this together because the person who initiates and wins this story will naturally become part of the history of this garden as one of its founders and creators, since this person is definitely not here by chance. And there will be no random person here. In other words, this will be a co-creator, someone who will leave their name in history, not only in the history of digital art and literature, but in the history of humanity as a whole. No more, no less.
Tell me, do you sell your paintings? I've seen them. You said you had 40 paintings displayed at the Crypto South conference. I saw that a few were sold. What's the general price range for these paintings?
The price range is from $1,000 to $10,000.
From $1,000 to $10,000.
Yes.
These are actual,
Yes.
paintings on the canvas. Then,
yes.
And you also have an NFT collection, right?
Yes.
And what's the price range there?
There it starts from, well, actually, when I first tried, I started with just a few dollars. Someone bought from me right away. I was like, oh, wow, that's interesting. That's important too. The beginning, I mean, I should say I wasn't connected to digital stuff at all. I just had a pen and paper. I wrote poetry, and did my drawings. But, well, of course, I was comfortable with computers, like for typing and so on. When in 2021, I saw the whole NFT thing, I gave it a try, and my pictures sold right away. I was like, oh, this is something interesting, and I started making money from my pictures. So I began to raise the prices higher and higher, and people kept buying and buying and buying. And that was really interesting. It was so fascinating, like whole new world that in a way responded in kind. Not everyone managed to do that. Apparently, there has to be some element of chance as well. Luck also plays a part in this story. Yeah, but luck can also be something you prepare for, And it reached a peak when I sold my most expensive NFT, let me think. $5,000. $5,000, yes. So 5, 2 Ether, 3 Ether, those were the prices I sold at.
Physically, and what about the most expensive physical painting? The one you sold?
600.
$600,000?
600,000 rubles.
6 rubles?
Yes. Let's go. This is not the limit. This is just the beginning.
Yes.
Absolutely. They're still growing. Well, that is, if last year they cost 100, 200, now they cost 500. And all this grows as you go into this world. And in a sense, it is an investment too, an investment in works of art that you can make money on.
So, in your collection, you have them individually, right?
Yes. Moreover,
each NFT is unique. If I buy one, can I resell it later?
Absolutely. Some people have already gone through several rounds, buying them for $50 or $100. They sold them, well, as they said, for 1,200, basically made a profit and then let them go. But I will make sure that these NFTs, there are only 350 of them, 350 paintings. I will not create any more. No, this is a period that is important for its exclusivity and for what the artist does. And these paintings will definitely end up in museums around the world, in the digital departments, all the artists who are working now, let's say in the digital department, are essentially the Matisses and Van Goghs of the new world. The new world. Right now, not many people understand this, but the most interesting thing is that it will only take 10 to 15 years for them to become famous. You won't need 100 years now, and certainly not have to die to become famous. Now, it's a different time, and those who play the long game and work as artists, in just 10 years, I'm telling you, everyone will be talking about them. People will start digging up archives, let's say, of NFT history, and the most notable ones will be brought up well. They'll experience exponential growth. But there won't be very many of them, just a few. Very few people survive in the long run, especially in NFTs. You get what I mean, right? There was this whole story. Everyone rushed into NFTs, so much money, boom, and then poof, it all collapsed, right? But actually, all that collapse has left a clean slate for the artist. Right now, at this very moment, for creative people, if you're listening to me honestly, go for it. The field has been cleared for you, really. So get to work. because an artist, well, they work. That's how they live. Poets, musicians, painters, anyone in the creative field, even film directors right now, you have a completely open field. So create, work, and right away, there definitely won't be any instant results here. But in the long run, if you, well, leave works of art in this story now, it will definitely pay off 100%.
So, I'd like you to give some advice specifically to creative people. Yes, those who paint pictures. For example, I have a friend, Pasha Timofeyev, hello to you. He's not just an artist, he's also a jeweler. And he makes unique jewelry pieces.
Well, yes.
So we were talking, and he asked me, it's just that I'm not very familiar with NFTs myself. I've never really dealt with them. So, for example, how could he, what recommendations would you give him if you met and he asked you, I'm a craftsman? He really makes amazing pieces, right? And they're unique too. Is there a way to sell them for more than just a few pennies? I mean, to sell them for a good price using, for example, NFTs and putting everything online? Because a lot of crypto people, many of them have a lot of money, right? They can easily afford, say, to buy some unusual ring or a pendant or something else for, let's say, 1 Ether.
Of course.
Exactly. But in that particular case, you're selling NFTs that are digitally drawn, which means they are created and exist solely in a digital format.
Yes.
Right. But is it possible to do this by selling real?
Yes, absolutely, you can do that. You just need to position yourself, first of all, as a jeweler artist. That's also an artist. And their jewelry pieces are works of art. That's the first thing. Especially if they are unusual, not mass produced, but handmade as one of a kind pieces, then it's definitely a work of art. Secondly, to digitize it, we now have everything we need for that. For example, you take a camera, place this work of art on a rotating platform, and shoot a 360-degree video. And this video itself also becomes a work of art, as well as a certificate of authenticity for your ring. And through this, it's simply an expansion of the market, right? If he's here in Krasnodar, for example, selling all this somewhere and has, well, kind of limited access to people, right? Then by posting this rotating video as an NFT, as a certificate, and as a work of art, for example, by creating a collection, say a capsule collection of 40 or 30 pieces, right? This is the 2025 collection. That's it. There won't be any more of them. And that's it. You send this link out to crypto enthusiasts or go to forums and say, I have an NFT collection of my artworks, buy them. For each NFT, I send
A physical one?
a physical one, and that's it. And the website crashes, you just need to package it and you can ship it anywhere in the world. Well, just join some chat, talk in the chat. And so one of
By package, you mean you need to make a website where people can donate or buy, right? Right?
no, the website is, for example, about the artist, a website about the artist. And these videos, you can upload them to a marketplace. There are NFT marketplaces where all kinds of art are sold. So on NFT marketplaces or even in Telegram, there are marketplaces where art is sold. But with this medium, you also, well, you sign in the different options. There's the signature of the artwork, and there's also the option where, as the artist, you send the physical jewelry piece as well. So essentially, you are selling it, but you're also positioning this video. You can film it artistically, right? The camera operators here will back me up when you film even just this color, right? And turn it into a video artwork that's also art. And when they make rings or other items as unique pieces, that's a work of art. So you really should be selling it as a work of art and price it higher from the start.
Which NFT marketplaces do you personally use?
OpenSay.
Only there?
Yes.
And if a crypto enthusiast buys a physical item, right? Well, the NFT certificate for the item, he has to provide some of his information so you know where to send it, right? Does the OpenSea platform allow you to contact?
Yes, of course. Well, when you create a collection, you can leave your contact information, where to reach you, and so on, so people can get in touch with you somehow. Of course, you can. What happened in the last cycle was that people just churned out artworks, but who did what? Who knows? So there was a lot of scam people sold and then disappeared. So that's why I'm saying that the artist needs to come forward and present what they create, and that's it.
So, if I understood you correctly, first you need a well-designed website that tells about the artist, their life journey, uniqueness, and some of their works, right?
Yes. And from the website, if someone, what does NFT provide? It simply gives you access to a global market. Basically, it means you can reach any story anywhere.
So, on this website, you can already place a link, let's say, and there you can post all of these things. And where, for example, do you make these models? Let's say someone makes a piece like a ring, for instance, right? So does he just take a photo and upload this picture to OpenSea, or
Yes.
does it need to be visualized somehow in a specific program?
No, well, for a piece of jewelry art, you still need to film it all around, so there's a platform, it rotates.
I see.
Yes, you film it, so it becomes kind of a live animated NFT, and then you upload this recording.
All right. And one last question. On stage, you talked about a painting. There's one entity and another entity intertwining. I wanted to ask, what does entity mean to you in this context?
Well, my NFT collection is called Entities, and there are, well, like light and dark entities that live within a person. Also, in this collection, I have 3 hypostases: white entities, black entities, and people. So people are separate because a person has both white and black entities, but there I just separate them further since the artwork allows me to, for example, highlight a light entity, a dark entity. And an entity for me is the manifestation of certain qualities of a person that they project into the world. A person can project negativity or they can project light, and there it's more like a image of people who carry a spectrum of qualities. In my collection there are 3 hypostases: the light ones, the dark ones, and people. Of course, an entity is essentially a quality of a person. It's just embodied in an artistic image.
I'd like to wrap up our podcast with a quick lightning round. I've prepared some questions that require a specific answer in one word, or at most 2 words. Or just yes, no, Bitcoin or Ethereum,
Bitcoin.
country to live in,
Russia.
city for work,
Moscow.
favorite IT company,
Telegram.
like black or white.
White.
What crypto connection are you most proud of?
Maxim Solovyov.
Maxim Solovyov, right? Who is this?
This is indeed the brilliant creator of, well, not exactly a crypto club, but rather a very successful and influential business club, which is famously known as Phenomenon.
Yes.
By the way, he lives in Krasnodar and is a very strong entrepreneur.
Have you met Buterin? You've never crossed paths anywhere?
Number.
He probably has 5,000 ethers, right?
I think I should meet him.
Yeah? So, what helps you maintain your work routine and stay in shape?
Poetry.
So, things like nutrition, sleep schedule, those kinds of things.
No, well, the main driver, as odd as it may sound, is poetry. But I also practice nutrition. I fast as well. I have a 10-day period where I don't eat well, nothing at all, but we do this kind of fasting on porridge. Yeah, so you eat 4 types of porridge and drink water. It really cleanses you, you lose weight, your mind becomes clearer. It's like a real fast.
Hmm. And what's your favorite and least favorite crypto project?
My favorite is the Trust Wallet because I've mastered it. And as for least favorite, I actually don't have any. I just haven't come across one I didn't like.
You've never lost anything, right?
Right. And even if I did lose something, I let it go with a pure heart and gratitude. I mean, I've lost a lot. I bought tons of NFTs to really understand and feel everything for myself, to see how it works, why things happen, why people leave, why they scam others. All of that, I find it all interesting. I go through all of this myself so I can really understand and feel what it's all about. It's a cool thing.
Hmm. Do you follow any crypto Telegram channels?
I read Vlad Utushkin's channel.
Can you say which crypto channel is your favorite?
Yeah, Vlad.
So you only read Vlad's channel, right?
Yeah, I know him personally. He's a great guy. I even walked 30,000 steps with him. Yeah. So that's it, basically.
And the last question, what's your favorite book?
My favorite book is the poetry of Sergei Alexandrovich Yesenin. So maybe his collected works.
Well, that's it. We've recorded a pretty good, concise podcast. Thank you again.
Thank you. Thanks for the invitation.
It was very interesting.
Yeah, today we really dove in and went deep. And, can I finish with something? I'd probably like to end with a poem. Think like a winner. Act with the fire of a star. You either just a spectator or the blacksmith of your own fate. If you turn to stone, if you're frozen in ice, ignite what you have in your soul, melt your cold fear. The lava of your desires melts the basalt of problems, sparks of memories, lightning of change. So I wish you, dear friends, that you always experience the lightning of change.